Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Hokyoji Sunday Dharma Talk. Today our speaker is Tim Macejak. Tim has been practicing for over 30 years, and he's our board chair, and he has a book out, Zen Dog, about his Zen dog. Anyway, he's locally famous, and we're happy to have him today. You're muted, Tim.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, Akio, if you could set up the ability for me to share screen.
Okay. I think I have to get my IT guy for help with that. Screen sharing. Oh, right there. Okay. Is that all you do?
Do you not have the ability to share the screen?
Not yet.
Huh. Because if I click screen share, it seems that we're only, that's R.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay. Host disabled.
Host disabled, pause. What is this? Oh, there, we found it. You should be good now.
Yes.
Thank you, IT guy.
We'll wait for the IT guy to get back to his chair. Okay, so the title of my talk today is Zen practice is to become an ordinary person. I don't know if those are showing up backwards for you guys.
No, that's good.
Okay, because it's backwards for me. It's like hieroglyphics, but I got this hanging on my wall here in my study. It's something I heard many years ago, and it kind of resonated with me, and I'm going to talk about it. What it means to practice as an ordinary person, what it doesn't mean, and why do we practice Zen anyway? So I'm going to first start with a story. About 25 years ago or so, I had the unfortunate experience of living with a teenage meth addict. This involved all sorts of lies and theft of money from family members and yelling. And just when Teresa and I were kind of at our wits' end, and for an afternoon or a day or two, he'd get all nicey nice and ask to help, if he could help with anything. And we knew it was completely fake, but just grateful for any little pockets of sanity, which is why they call it a roller coaster ride, because you knew those nice pockets were just something temporary. So around this time, I went to one of Hokyoji's sessions, their 7-day retreats, and I was at this retreat. And during these retreats, as you know, there's an opportunity to speak with the teacher there. And I have a hard time coming up with things I want to speak to the teacher about, but I thought this time, well, I can speak about all this anger I have toward this situation I'm living with. So I'm having, this one-on-one private conversation with this teacher that was there. And, I start talking about the situation and all this anger I have. And she says to me, "You don't seem very angry." I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm angry. She says, "You don't look angry to me." I said, I'm angry all the time. She says, lots of people come here talking to me about anger, and you just don't seem like you're angry. So we're having kind of this weird conversation where I'm trying to convince her I'm angry, and she's saying, So she gives me a different set of instructions for Zazen. She says, why don't you try for a little while, instead of, following your breath, and when thoughts come up, returning to the present moment, letting go of those thoughts. She says, why don't instead you just observe your emotions? Just do that for a while. So like, okay. So go back and we start sitting again. And maybe 20 minutes into the first period, 30 minutes, I don't remember exactly when, I start getting flooded with anger as an emotion. And it stays for like 3 days. It's like 3 days of just angry zazen. Never experienced anything like that before or since. And somewhere during all my angry zazen, she gave a Dharma talk. And during the talk, she said, Zen practice is to become an ordinary person. I don't know why she said that. I don't know what her teaching was about it, but it resonated with me immediately. That it kind of became clear to me that my practice had been kind of a technique practice of I'd have this anger with this teenage meth addict living at home, and I would kind of, after a little bit, let go of the anger. Maybe after an hour or two, would come back to the present moment, and then anger would come up again, not much later, and I would experience it some, but let go and come back to the present moment. And it seemed like this is perfect Zen practice, and it wasn't bad. But there was kind of this shortcut being done around my emotions. I was feeling angry, but I had this technique where I was able to let it go, and I really wasn't experiencing it the way an ordinary person might experience this anger. I think the whole practice, my whole practice, its mood and tone kind of changed once I started to hold in, deeper down, that my practice was to be ordinary. So one of the first questions that comes to mind when Zen practice is to become an ordinary person is, isn't it possible to be too ordinary? It kind of sounds like a recipe for disaster. And I would say, yes, it is possible to be too ordinary. And I'm going to give a couple examples. And the first one is going to be my 1 15-second video I'm going to share. So I'm going to operate the share screen flawlessly now. Okay. Share. Okay, so this video is 15 seconds long. So let me just play the video and we'll start now. Does everyone see the video? Like Hokyoji, do you see it's up there? Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, stop share. So my wife sent this to me one day because that's me. That is me trying to fix something at home. That is me trying to assemble something with those easy to follow assembly instructions. That is me basically dealing with any uncooperative inanimate object. So is this what I mean by being too ordinary? Actually, no, that was fine. It's fine to get frustrated with inanimate objects. It's perfectly an ordinary human type of behavior. But here's the thing. When I am frustrated with trying to fix something at home, I am often letting out not just one F-bomb, but a series of F-bombs and some other type of bombs, sometimes all in sequence, one right after the other. But if I were to be trying to fix the same item at Hokyoji during a retreat, there wouldn't be any F-bombs. The worst that'd probably be would be a good grief, which is kind of my fall to non-swearing expression. And my whole demeanor would be pretty different. And if I was trying to fix this item at work, I'd be somewhere in between. As an example, at work, we have all sorts of postal equipment, which is old and well used. And one thing that happened, there's these parcels that come in these kind of taller containers, and they have these latches you have to undo in order to remove the web strapping that's holding the parcels in. And you just pull this little lever and the bar comes down. But sometimes the lever doesn't work. So there's this other little piece of metal you swivel in and then the bar comes down. But sometimes that doesn't want to move either. So you take these heavy wire snips that every postal employee has, and you take the pointy end and you whack it as hard as you can to that swivel point. And usually after 1 or 2 whacks, it releases, but sometimes it doesn't release. And you're going at it 30 seconds, and I let out an F-bomb or 2, but just 1 or 2. And then when I finally get it to come down, I will say, I won, really loud, which people find amusing. So there's some, swearing going on. There's some frustration, but there's also some humor. And also just say, just as a kind of an aside, one time me and others could not get this bar to release. 5 minutes working at it. So we actually had to take the wire snips and cut through the web fabric and basically destroy the piece of equipment. At that point, I'll have to say, I didn't say I won. I said, quoting from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, all right, we'll call it a draw, which if any of you are familiar with that, King Arthur is riding off on his so-called horse, and the Black Knight is shouting that after him as he's sitting there on the ground with no arms and no legs. All right, we'll call it a draw. But anyway, so there's 3 different types of reactions I have to, this type of frustration. And am I like tripolar or something? I mean, they're very different. And I think what you can say is going on here is that it's okay that I'm ordinary, but my practice at home is a little too ordinary. I'm behaving in ways that I wouldn't somewhere else. I don't know then what I can expect to act like I would do at Hokyoji. It's a certain set of unusual circumstances, but there's I think a way that Zuiko Redding from the Cedar Rapids Zen Center kind of taught about how to deal with this particular type of issue. Zuiko is very traditional, spent 6-7 years studying in Japan, and she always wears her robes. And so a lot of times people think she always wears her robes because she's so traditional, which is at least in part true. But when asked, why do you always wear your robes everywhere? She said it's to remind herself about how she's behaving when she's around other people. And she had an example for this, and I no longer remember it, so I'm going to make one up. So this isn't exactly what she said, but she would imagine she's standing in the line, let's say at a fast food taco place, and it's a long line, and then it's finally her turn, and let's say the person behind the counter suddenly stops and pulls out their phone and starts texting. And she said she's tempted to say, hey, you, wake up, stop thinking around with your phone, there's people here. But she said with her robes on, aghast that people would see a Buddhist priest, getting so snotty and sarcastic with them, some 16-year-old boy probably on his first, job ever, so she said it reminded her, just pay attention to how, you're around other people. So I think we can, to avoid our effort becoming too ordinary, we can practice as if we're metaphorically wearing our robes. I wouldn't suggest we always wear robes. I don't have robes, but that we're around other people, or that we're some sort of situation, whatever it is works for us, that, we're paying more attention to our behavior because we think it's public in some sort of way, as opposed to the privacy of my own home, where only the dog and my wife see what's going on. Another way our practice or effort can be too ordinary will be with people that we're around all the time. This can be a spouse, but it certainly can also be family members. It can be with a coworker we've worked with for 10 years or so. But what happens in these relationships is there's certain routines that kind of get set up, and certain repetitive things that happen. And certainly I behave at home sometimes with my wife in ways that are just plain embarrassing. I'm not even going to share any stories about it. But that because there's like there's a comfort level, but it's not just a comfort level around the other person. It's a comfort level with our own mindfulness that we kind of get, how do I put it here? We let our guard down with our mindfulness. And that's part of our practice that I think easily can become too ordinary. And I think kind of the antidote to this, or what's helped me, is to practice a kind of a preemptive mindfulness. That if our partner is coming home late from work, and we know when they come home late from work, they're usually in a crabby mood, we can kind of launch a sort of preemptive mindfulness that we know they're going to be crabby, and it triggers certain responses in us, which, you know, sometimes aren't really what we want to be saying. You know, ideally, we have our mindfulness ranked up all the time, but that doesn't really happen, does it? But, you know, this also with a coworker who's, let's say, or a boss who, this particular boss often asks us when things are busy, what have you been doing all morning? Or what do you still have left to do? Or just, you know, something that the first time or two is kind of amusing. Around the 20th or 30th time they've done this, as soon as they walk in the door, one starts to get tense. But if we launch our preemptive mindfulness, you know, we can respond in a way, you know, we're still that ordinary person, but we're putting a little bit more effort into the situation. So we could say that, you know, our practice is to become an ordinary person, but to have extraordinary energy in our practice. And no, I'm not going to say that either. That's a pretty high bar to set. We're going to have the same sort of issues, that our effort isn't always going to be where, you know, it's supposed to be. That there are going to be times when we have high energy. And when we have those, we should dive into it, not squander, you know, that willingness to put in the high energy. Dogen writes in the Fukan Zanzengi, which is the universal recommendation of Zazen, his piece on that, he says, who would take wasteful delight in spark from the flintstone? Besides, form and substance are like the dew on the grass, destiny like the dart of lightning, emptied in an instant, vanished in a flash. Our life is temporary, so don't waste our opportunities to practice. But I'll also add, don't cling to any expectation of some kind of long duration for high energy Zen practice. That's a recipe for frustration and for maybe even some odd behaviors. We just more want to avoid super ordinary effort. The kind of effort where a lot of times in spiritual practice or religious, any religion, people start getting enamored with the teachings as beliefs, and they really believe them really strongly, but these beliefs really don't seem to connect to their lives in any way, and they don't seem to change their behavior in any ways, and often seem to act totally different than these beliefs that they hold so dearly. Our practice doesn't always have to be high energy. Our practice is what it is. Our effort is what it is. But it shouldn't be too ordinary. We should make sure it doesn't become almost non-existent. So if practice is not to become something extraordinary, what's it for? Well, it's not a self-improvement program. We hear that a lot, but it's kind of hard not to think of it that way. I mean, we don't want to be the same selfish, self-centered person after we begin practice, causing a lot of self-inflicted pain and pain in others. We want something to be different. It could be said that Zen practice is instead of a self-improvement program, it's a life improvement program, which I like a lot better because it's not just about us. It's about everything. When we practice, things in general get better. But it still feels a little crass to say Zen practice is a life improvement program. It's kind of like very commercial. For $99.99 for a 3-month program, your life can improve. It's really not, or your life around you can improve. It's there's a real thought that we want to have a reason to practice. to justify sitting staring at a wall, which is kind of like a pretty much doing nothing behavior. But this need to have a reason is a cause for suffering. And Zazen itself is a very unique practice where we exert energy into the immediate moment with no gaining idea. And usually we have gaining ideas for a reason. And here we're putting all this energy into something without the gaining idea. Sawaki Roshi, known also as Homeless Kodo, famously said, Zazen is good for nothing. So if Zazen's good for nothing, why do we practice? And of course, he got this question because he would say Zazen is good for nothing, I think, quite a bit. And this is what he said. He says, when somebody asks me what Zazen is good for, I say that Zazen isn't good for anything at all. And then some say that in that case, they'd rather stop doing Zazen. But what's running around satisfying your desires good for? What is gambling good for? In dancing. What is it good for to get worked up over winning or losing in baseball? It's all good for absolutely nothing. That's why nothing is a sensible sitting silently in Zazen. I also read a commentary. It was probably by Uchiyama Roshi, but I didn't write it down at the time, so I don't know who said it. But that actually what Homeless Kodo is saying when he says Zazen is good for nothing, that phrase good for nothing it's very negative. But what he's actually saying is Zazen is good. And what is it good for? Why, it's good for nothing, which is a totally different whole mood and spirit to the whole Zazen is good for nothing. Some other Zen teachers have chimed in on this. Domyo Burke said, you have access to ultimate peace and perfection right now, just exactly the way you are. Liberation isn't dependent on the degree of your self-improvement. It's about this very moment. At any particular moment, our perfection can shine through. When the three poisons of greed, we're trying to pull things toward us that we are attracted to, and aversion, trying to push away things that we don't like, and ignorance, thinking of ourselves as the one main person in the universe at the center. When the three poisons aren't at the center of our actions, we are perfect right in that moment. At that point, ordinary person, unordinary person, is not really relevant. It's all about that particular moment. The Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck said, who knows how you should be? We simply do our best over and over and over. Ordinary, unordinary, she says, drop it all. Just do our best over and over and over. And sometimes our best is pretty mediocre. That's the definition of our best. So Zen practice is to become an ordinary person. A couple last thoughts about that as a practice. One of our basic addictions as a species, varies from person to person, but as the human race goes throughout time, we have a predilection towards self-criticism, sometimes very harsh self-criticism. Zen practice is to become an ordinary person, should hopefully help lighten that up. And also, Zen practice as an ordinary person, holding that at its center of our practice, encourages ourselves to give ourselves a break. That we don't have to be, some sort of thing like living with a meth addict. We don't have to be some wonderful Zen student. We can just be ordinary. There's no pressure. Ordinary person, we've already succeeded even before we began. We've achieved that goal. Let me just finish with a quote from Shunryu Suzuki, which I think kind of really summarizes things very well. Shunryu Suzuki has said, you're perfect the way you are, and you could use a little improvement. That's my talk.
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Tim?
Jan?
My father was rather extraordinary, and I didn't find this out for many years, but I never saw him in anger. And then when I first got introduced to Sandy's family, the woman that I married, they were very sweet, very nice. And then once her father was actually comfortable with me being as a part of the family, then he began to show his angry and bitter disposition, which kind of made me feel good that he was comfortable enough around me to manifest his truer nature. But at the same time, it was kind of explosive and difficult to be around at sometimes, and it was something that I wasn't used to at all. And when I first came to Zen Center, MZMC, I remember an awful lot of people asked questions about anger. And I thought, man, did I come to the right place? Because I didn't know about anger. I wasn't an angry person. So Kikon, Mike Howard, I don't think he's online with us today. We're both in this Varela symposium this weekend, so we're kind of busy. But he's been working with Carla McLaren, who works with emotions, because Zen really doesn't deal a lot with emotions, which is probably why so many people were asking Roshi about anger. But Carla McLaren basically, if I can sum up her whole teaching very quickly, is emotions are information. We should just remove the valences, which means we shouldn't think of them as good or bad. They're providing us information, and we should just go at them and see what information they're providing. And then they just kind of, there's kind of a processing, a developmental thing you can do with that information. And then it's not stifled, and it's not, explosive. It's not a problem. It's just there as information. So it's very kind of transformative way to look at this. And yesterday in this symposium, someone even mentioned the Heart Sutra, basically negating all the teachings of the early Buddhist texts, and they never talk about emotion. Because there is no emotion in the original teachings. So I think it is important for us to begin to look at this kind of situation with emotion. So.
Juan?
Good morning, Tim. Thank you very much for the Dharma talk. I appreciate it very much. I find one of the things that you mentioned a little bit confusing. I'm hoping that you would speak a little bit about that. You mentioned premeditated mindfulness. Isn't that sort of living in the future or not in the moment? Can you please talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's preemptive mindfulness. It's more like putting your awareness up, which would, if there was a situation that 4 hours from now I'm going to be at work, and I know the supervisor is going to be at work, then that's a little too preemptive. That would be going way into the future. But the supervisor shows up at work, and I'm there, and I know reasonably soon they're going to come in and ask me what I've been doing all morning. I think that's current enough. It's putting my awareness up. It's not sitting there thinking about, are they coming in? What are they going to say? What am I going to say back? It's just being more alert, more awake, so that when they speak and ask that question, I just don't blurt out the first thing that comes to my mind, that I have a more reasoned answer, and that I'm not yanked about by this trigger that happens. Yes.
Just to follow up, would it be fair to say that you should always be mindful?
Yes, but it doesn't always work out that way. But there still can be certain times where it's helpful to really make sure we're mindful, since we're not mindful all the time, 100% of the time. Erin?
Yeah, thank you for your talk. I had a question. You mentioned the word perfect a couple of times and finished with Shunryu Suzuki's use of it. And I've seen that word in some of the texts that I'm reading as well, like living your perfect life and so on. And that always kind of actually, I think your talk maybe helped me think about that already. But I was wondering if you could, when we think of perfect, we think of no mistakes, and that just seems kind of impossible. So I'm just wondering, maybe historically, or exactly what that means, that word perfect.
I'll answer with my limited understanding, or maybe a partial answer, that our base situation is this perfection. Suppose, let's say, Christianity, original sin is like the base. Our base is perfection, but that we keep moving away from this perfection through the three poisons of greed, trying to pull things together. We identify, oh, I like that. And then we attach and try and pull that toward us. And aversion, oh, I don't like that. And so we have identified something we don't like, so we try and push it away. And then ignorance, that we're, the main person, that we're not all interconnected, that we feel there's a permanent self, which I feel that way all the time, so I'm ignorant. But that when we're, let's say, for example, let's say we're weeding and we're not practicing greed or aversion, and we're not really thinking about ourselves, we're just in the moment. I think at that point it's considered our perfections coming through. There's really nothing lacking. Perfection usually means, without flaws on some type of long-term permanent basis. But I think it's then we think about in the particular moment. That's my limited answer I can give from, imagine it's incomplete.
Thank you.
Mary?
Hi, everyone. I really appreciated your talk, Tim, and I really appreciate listening to the comments and questions as well. Well, I experience anger all the time. Anger, frustration, and I'm a pretty verbal person. I let my emotions, out. My emotions have always been pretty close to the surface. But as I have gotten older, I realize that doesn't, it doesn't help always to have your emotions right there at the surface, ready to jump on out. But one of the things that you said was, triggered something for me. And that is, for me, a long history when I was a kid, pretty much throughout my school age years through 18. I was in a religious-based school, and the emphasis from a religious perspective then was always on should and shouldn'ts. And it was very behavioral focused, what you shouldn't do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what you should do. So it's very rule-based. And so somehow through your behavior, you're going to be a better person. And it was almost to the point at which it was denial of what you were feeling. And so your behavior is baked in, should and shouldn't. But what you said at the end of your talk about the idea of self-criticism is really resonated with me, because when you know, for me, it was should and shouldn'ts all the time. And then what happens is that you can never, ever achieve what you should. It just doesn't happen. So what I've learned, and a lot through yoga practice, but through Buddhism now, is just the idea of really being compassionate with yourself. And through yoga practice, for sure, breathing, pausing and breathing and bringing your breath in to your body and pausing. And I think for me, just trying to do Zazen, which I'm not very good at. Look, self-criticism, right? But practicing, so the idea of practicing, and then bringing compassion into that practice.
Yeah, well, that's very, very good, Marion. Actually, you remind me of something I was going to mention in my talk and I forgot. But my wife, Teresa, calls it the should-be bird. The should-be bird that sits on your shoulder and says, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. So shoo that should-be word way. Kat?
Yeah, Mary and I must be of the same mind this morning, because I was thinking about self-criticism as well. And it's more, and I want to thank you for bringing that up. But, you know, what I can see in my own practice is that as someone who's been instructed in some of the foundations of Zen, I at least have moments where I'm aware of the three poisons, where I have, in the stream of life, fallen into greed, aversion, and ignorance. And one of my mechanisms that I frequently indulge in is to catch those moments and then criticize the self. And so, and what that does is just become the self-perpetuating cycle that you can never jump out of until you truly do Zazen. And so, you know, for me, that I think is really important to try to keep that in mind, that there is a way out of that. And so thank you very much, Tim. So happy to be here this morning with you and everyone else. And that's all I have.
Okay, it looks like we might be to the end of our discussion period. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Tim. That was a wonderful talk. I'd like to move on to some announcements. Next Sunday, Reverend Kekon Mike Howard will be giving the talk. You can see the full lineup of speakers for the next month on our website. And video of the talks will be available on our YouTube page and also on our website. You can also find talks by other teachers on our website. Another way you can stay in touch with us is to sign up for our email list to receive our newsletter and other announcements. So please, if you are able, go to the link on the website and donate. We're going to end this morning with the closing chant, which is in your chat box. And then I will ring Tim out. He'll do some bows and I'll ring him out. Okay, so here we go. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.